We all know that early detection is the single most important determination in improving patient outcomes. Bako Diagnostics remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in the diagnosis of conditions of the lower extremity. Bako Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Johanna Richey. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. I went to the Cardinal game this weekend. I was watching Kyler Murray go wild.
It's a good game.
Oh, I was loving it.
Yeah, there was a lot of yelling in our household. Good
Yeah.
yelling. Sometimes it's not so, most of the time it's not so good yelling, but this was really good for football.
Very good.
Football hasn't been good yelling lately. Oh.
Joe, today we have a phenomenal episode in store for our listeners. We are joined by the leadership of the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery, their CEO, Catherine Kreiter. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Ms. Kreiter.
Thank you.
We are also joined by their president, Dr. Michelle Butterworth. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Michelle.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
We're pretty informal on Dean's Chat, and if it's okay with you, we'll go first names, Michelle, Kathy, Joe, and Jeff.
All right.
Perfect.
All right. Well, let's kick it off. Kathy, one of the fun things about doing Dean's Chat is we find out lots of things about people that we know, but we don't really know, right? So I was just going to give a little bit of a highlight here, a little background. You've been the CEO at the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery, and maybe we'll call it ABFAS. We like to use acronyms since 2015, so it's almost 10 years. But interestingly, prior to that, you were the CEO at the International Association for the Study of Pain, and you were an associate director for global health at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I'm sure we'll touch base on a little bit about that also. But really what I wanted to ask you about, we had first year students come in and we did orientation, and I was kind of going through the organizations in our profession. And when I got to the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery, I had my own definition. But since you're here, I was hoping you could tell us about the ABFAS, what they stand for and what they do.
Sure. So American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery, also known as ABFAS, is the only CPME recognized surgical board. And it actually started, it's our 50th anniversary next year, started in 1975 as the National Board of Podiatric Surgery, and then it changed to the American Board of Podiatric Surgery, and then in 2014 changed to the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. So what we do is we certify foot and ankle surgeons. We have a series of exams people take to become board qualified or board eligible. And then there's an additional case review requirement. And if people pass that, they become board certified.
Wow. And I was going to ask you what the significance of board certification is, but first I just wanted to clarify for our listeners. The CPME is the Council on Podiatric Medical Education, which is the governing body for certification, whether it's schools or whether it's surgery boards or medicine boards or continuing medical education. So that's fabulous. So on a year-to-year basis, what does it look like at ABFAS? I mean, is it mostly preparing for the exams, I imagine?
Yeah, we have a number of committees that develop the exams. In fact, we just came off of a committee weekend. So there's one that handles all the didactic exams, which include LEAD, which you two are familiar with because you take LEAD. And then there's another committee that deals with case review and making changes to that process. And then another committee that develops all the cases that are in CBPS, computer-based patient simulation. And then there's another LEAD group that works on the policy behind LEAD, because there's obviously a lot of different policies because it's a new program and how to make sure that it's working correctly. And we are in the certification business. That's what we do.
Fabulous. Michelle and I remember the days of going to the Marriott in Chicago and breaking out in a sweat every time I see that hotel. But Joe, you're a more recent grad and you've been involved with board certification with ABF. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm so excited to have both of you here. Thank you so much for carving out time to help talk to our audience about what the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgeons is and how it helps its members. And I will first do a little disclaimer that I have some of my own inherent bias with ABFAS, as I've been a member for almost 10 years myself now. So I was one of the first groups that took the CBPS online. And I remember we were terrified because no one had done it and we didn't know what to expect. And I tell this story to the students all the time that the very first exam we took didn't have images. Like there were some cases the images didn't work. And so it's like, based on the image, what would you do? And like, you just have to, you don't get to ask someone, you don't get to exam challenge. You just have to work through it, right? You take what you've been given and you do the best that you can. And it obviously worked out fine. And I'm sure that on the back end, there was some handling of those questions and however that manner was appropriate, whether it was throwing it out or figuring out how to grade it, based on the images that didn't work. But it's a wonderful story, again, helping students realize that, everything isn't going to be perfect all the time and it's okay. You're going to get through it. You just have to problem solve. And sometimes your problem solve is you take what you've got and you move forward.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk certainly more about the processes in a little bit. Well, maybe it's a good time to introduce the president, Dr. Michelle Butterworth. Dr. Butterworth graduated from the Temple University School of Podiatric Medicine. She did a 4-year surgical training program at the University of Penn Presbyterian Medical Center. You've had just a phenomenal career in service to our profession, Michelle. You were also the president of the American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons, now being the president of the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. We're really excited that you're here to join us on Dean's Chat. Thanks again.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
So having been around the block, you might say, on the board certification and educational arm of surgery in the profession, tell us a little bit about the board of ABFAS, because I was reading your CV and your bio and you were on all those different committees, but what's it like? I mean, how long have you been on the board and what does it look like to become the president?
So I have been on the board. I believe this is my, 6th year, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm in, I think, my second, third-year term, the end of my second, third-year term. Served on several committees before I got onto the board. I should say when I finished my service with ACFAS, I still wanted to do something. I wanted to continue to give back. I thought I still had more to give. So I started getting involved with committees with ABFAS, and I had been familiar with some of the committees and things before and around. So I became involved with the committees, more interested in the work, very impressed about how much goes in to this committee work. I wish people could really be able to experience how much work is involved in developing one single question. Of course we get, nobody's perfect and there's mistakes and but unfortunately we hear all the negative comments sometimes on questions and things. But if they saw where that question began and everything that it had to go through to get to where it was, I always like to see new committee members, especially on the didactic review group, come in and their eyes are just opened up at everything that's been involved with the development of this. And I think people would be pretty impressed about how much work goes into it. So really just became involved with the committees on the, it's gone through several name changes, but now it's called the Didactic Review Group. Basically, we used to write the questions and then we meet together as groups and they get edited millions of times and things like that. But that's sort of where I began to be involved. I've been on the bylaws committee. That was a working committee. If you've ever rewritten bylaws before, that was a lot of fun. I've been on this exam prep task force. That's a very impressive committee that's really grown tremendously in the past few years. Axel Nuvong is actually our chairman, and she has done an amazing job leading that group and really putting a lot of prep materials on our website to help candidates, particularly with CBPS, as Joanna said. It's a lot about learning the test taking process. So that's been an excellent committee. Now I'm on the communications committee, chairman of that. And, I love my work with that. We are very involved with the young members and students and residents, and we can get into that a little bit more. But yeah, just through committee work, I've always kind of wanted to be part of the strategy, not just the tactics involved. So I always look at being on the board as as more strategic planning and, how can I help this organization move forward? Where are we going in 5 years? Where are we going in 10 years? And that's where I feel I gained my experience from ACFAS being on the board, because that's really where I learned to change from doing tactical work and busy bee work. I'm kind of one of those little worker bees, but really opening your mind more towards strategic thinking. And so once I got involved with the committees, I thought I'd do good strategically, and so became involved with the board. And we have a great board. We really do. We've got a great vision set for us. I will say one thing I really admire about my board is that they always put ABFAS first. There's no egos, there's no self-driven agendas, and it's just really nice to work with a really hardworking group of people that really have the best interest of ABFAS and our diplomates and our candidates at heart. So I've really enjoyed my work, and I feel very honored to be able to represent this organization as their president this year.
That's great. Last year I talked to Jeff Giesking and Diana Rogers, and Diana echoed exactly what you said, Michelle, about being introduced to the board and the eye-opening experience of exam preparation and developing exams. And then we talked about it in social media, the picture, I think it's in March, of the room with all the computers and everybody getting ready to take exams. I mean, it truly, truly is impressive. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, even the lead system. And again, as you talk about like how much prep work goes into just one question, and this is something that is a continual process. And what I really liked about when that transition happened, because thankfully I have not had to go to Chicago and sit and have a 10-year recertification experience, which I'd be, if that was what was required, then that's what you do. But what I really appreciate about the lead program is the idea that we're just continually learning, and we're kind of just having check-ins. It's not a punitive thing. It's just like, hey, where are you in your own certified process? Like, are you staying up on the literature? Are you where your peers expect you to be? And if you're not, then you get a very detailed kind of feedback about where maybe you need to brush up on this, or maybe look into some of the articles on this, and you give references when things, maybe you didn't get the right answer. And it's like, here's where we were basing this question off of. And again, I find that there's so much value to that it's not just, here's a multiple choice test, good luck. There is a lot of thought that goes into it, and a lot of constructive feedback if you are performing well, or if you're not performing well, that kind of where to focus. So can you talk a little bit more about the LEAD program? For, again, the practicing physicians will know what it is, but for some of the residents and the students, they're probably not familiar with what that looks like, and maybe even the thought to how that transitioned, since it was sort of new, a couple years now, but what that looked like.
Sure. Kathy might be able to tell you the transition, but I can tell you a funny story, because LEAD has really taken over what used to be our recertification exams. So we used to have to recertify every 10 years for either foot or reconstructive rear foot and ankle surgery, or both, whatever you were certified in. And now LEAD has taken the place of that. So there's no recertification exam. It is a continuous learning process, as you said, and we've gotten great feedback from it, because just as you said, you can sit there, take the exam, and you actually learn from it. You get explanations and rationales as to the correct answer. There's references, so you can go look at the references. But that's what it's about. It's to learn from it. So if you got something wrong, you research why. And some people still disagree with some of the answers, and that's kind of going to be the way it is. But we've also taken that, from that we can see where we are as a profession. Are there certain areas we're deficient in overall? Are there certain questions that the majority of people do poorly in, or is there better ones? And then we can even tailor that to maybe some CME events and things, and focus more where you need to learn. And we are proud that you do get CME credits for LEAD as well. So we've gotten a lot of great positive feedback. And I have to share a really funny story, because I shared this with my communications committee last week. And just as Jeff said, we are kind of part of the old timers in the old exam process. So, when we came through, we didn't have in-training exams as a resident. We finished residency, we took our didactic exam. And if you passed, you became board qualified. Then you collected cases, and then you had the treacherous walk down the Marriott Hall for the oral exam to try to pass your oral exam so that you would become board certified. Well, if you think about how everything has changed now, so we have in-training exams now that the residents can take, and if they pass one of those in their final year, that counts towards their board qualification. So they don't have to take another exam. And then after that, once they finish residency, they start collecting cases. There is no further, well, besides CBPS, sorry, there is no further exam. After you become board qualified, you simply turn in your cases. And if you pass case review, you're board certified. So there's no more oral exam, you know, so I think the stress levels are a lot better. And like I said, there's no more recertification exam now. You take lead, because the funny story I was going to share is I was going up for my recertification exam as in foot surgery. And I was also being inducted that year as the ACFAS president, right after I was taking my recert exam. And I walked out of there thinking that I failed my recert exam. I was petrified. I was embarrassed. I kept saying, how can this happen? I'm getting ready to be inducted as president of the Surgical Society, and everybody's going to know I just failed my recert exam. You know, I was just petrified. And so it was actually Jim Lamb was the executive director at the time. And of course, word got back that I was not happy with the exam. I thought, you know, there were several mistakes on it, you know, the typical candidate complaining about all the questions, right? So, you know, he sent me a big stack of questions and said, well, go through it. Tell me what's right and wrong. Tell me what you think. And that's actually how I got involved being on committees with ABFAS. So that was my introduction, and I did pass my recert, just FYI. But anyway, that was kind of my little terror moment, but was great because that's how I continued my service.
You know, Michelle, I had a similar experience because I was part of the North Colorado residency program. I helped found it, and I was the clerkship director. And I made sure I took my recert in the first year of eligibility, just in case, right? And the thought, similar to you, was, oh my gosh, how can I be here teaching students, teaching residents, and fail my board recert? So that was an element of paranoia going on for sure. Can I shift gears just a little bit, Kathy?
Wait, I was going to ask Kathy about lead, because that was a transition that happened while she's been CEO. So if you could give us a little of that kind of history.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so LEAD came about, you're familiar with the American Board of Medical Specialties, which are all the boards for all of the allopathic medicine. And we attend their conference every year, and they talked about, there were two boards that had switched to longitudinal assessments because everybody had a recert, which is pretty standard. And we brought that information back to the board, and you know what it was, it's a huge philosophical switch. Because in the past, what you're doing is, you know, you're getting somebody certified, and then 10 years later, they take an exam. And the change is we want to make sure that once they're certified, so that's the gate, right? To make sure you're certified. And after you're certified, we want to make sure that you stay up to date. So that's the switch, making sure that everybody stays up to date with the knowledge. We visited the American Board of Anesthesiology and the American Board of Pediatrics. We had a small committee. Chris Latufo was the president at the time, and found out how they were doing everything, and then started developing it on our own, and we were able to launch it, and it's been a big success.
Thank you, Joe. I was going to ask something similar, but then I was also going to say, what you've been here as the CEO for almost 10 years in a 50-year span. What's the big plan for 50 years? Celebration.
We're in the planning phase right now, but you know, the actual birthday is June 17th. We always have our business meeting in March, or at the FACFAS ASC, which will be in March next year. So we actually have a committee that's working on it. We had our call this week, so yeah, we're going to have an anniversary bash, so just stay tuned on that.
Thank you. And then Michelle, I was going to mention the least enjoyable committee had to be the bylaws. Whoops, we lost Michelle.
Yeah, she's gone.
Well, she'll come back.
She comes
So,
back.
Kathy, off the top of your head, well, how many committees do you have with ABFAS, just for listeners?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6. And then do each of the...
And then we have ad hocs when small things happen. You know, we have a special project, we'll just form an ad hoc task force.
That makes sense. Do presidents have to serve as they go through the ranks on X amount of committees? For example?
No, but everybody on the board has come up through committee work. Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. All right.
And the bylaws, when we changed them, when Michelle gets on, she can talk about it. That was my first big project. And we put Michelle on there because she had just come off of ACFAS.
Oh.
So we thought it was a perfect person.
And actually, so I would love to, if you don't mind, kind of also speaking, we've talked a lot with different members of ACFAS, various presidents of ACFAS and past presidents. Could you talk a little bit about the relationship between the American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons and the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgeons and kind of what that relationship is? We'll start with Kathy.
Oh, start with me?
Sure.
That's a good relationship because you have to be board certified to be a member of ACFAS. And there are people who have served in leadership positions on both organizations. From a CEO to CEO conversation, PJ and I talk a lot. So yeah, it's a good relationship. We do joint college visits. And then we try and explain to people what the difference is because most people get totally confused.
Yeah. Do y'all have me back?
Yes.
Okay. I'm on my phone. My computer's loading up. Sorry, we had a power surge and everything just went out. Welcome to little town, rural little town. I can tell you the relationship with ACFAS is great. Ironically, we have several members of our board who are previous ACFAS board members and past presidents. It's kind of like all of a sudden this flurry of past presidents have come about. And same thing with theirs. They have past presidents and board members on their board as well. And what Kathy said, in order to be a member with them, you would have had to have become board qualified or certified with us. And so we worked hand in hand. For example, like I said, with LEAD, when we can see where there's areas that we may need to improve on, that's things that we can then send to ACFAS and say, hey, this is kind of where people need some work on. Maybe we can do some lectures or some CME or something around these topics. This might be helpful. So we work hand in hand with that. We're also have talked about getting more involvement with students and residents, particularly the residents, because I really feel like that's sort of a group that they're hard to contact. They're kind of spread out. You don't have like the main schools to go through like we do with the students, but we are going to try to get more involved with the ACFAS regions, with ABFAS also involved, with more academic offerings and things like that. And also not just the lectures and academics, but also going over, different types, board certification 101 types of things and more information out there. The more we can get out to them, the better. So we are working on that. And as Kathy said, we do a school visit with the students with ACFAS, and that's always a lot of fun. We both give our organizational presentations, but then we also do brief academic lectures. Most of the time we do some type of workshop and things with them, and it's just a lot of fun. So I think we work very closely together. We communicate on a regular basis on things. So I think it's a great symbiotic relationship, of course.
Would it be overly reductive to then say that the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgeons is really the certifying board for board qualification, eligibility, and that ACFAS is more the educational CME arm? Is that kind of a fair simplified?
I would say that's fair. The huge difference, and for me, it was amazing how the two work so closely together, but they're so different.
Yeah.
And you just hit the nail on the head. The difference is we are a certifying board. We are not a membership organization. And so we used to kind of always make a joke about it that ACFAS were the actors out there promoting and, lecturing and doing all this stuff, delivering the education, communicating with the public. And then ABFAS were the producers. We're the ones doing the work kind of behind the scenes. And that just sort of summed it up really well to me, kind of what's the difference between the two. But it is quite different, not being a membership organization. Like your job is a certifying board, and you've got missions and things that you take very seriously, that you stick to. And so, yeah, I'd say that's the major difference.
Kathy, you were about to talk about the bylaws committee, and you said that Michelle had helped you with that through transition. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. And anyway, Michelle, at first I was going to say, when you first become a board member, they probably stick you on the bylaws committee or something. That doesn't sound like the most fun, but
punishment.
There's a good story here we're in.
It predated our board too, because it was an ad hoc committee. So I think normal when a new CEO comes in is the first things they do is they look at the bylaws, because the bylaws are the governing documents. I don't remember how long ago it had been since they had revised them. But we did a total scrub to making sure that they reflected the organization as it was, to get rid of things that you don't need in the bylaws, you put in policy. It's kind of boring stuff depending on your own interest. But we had a good committee. Michelle was on it. And I know we met once at the wonderful O'Hare Hilton. And then everything else people did online. But then we took it out to a vote for the members, and it passed like 90%, something like that. So
all the behind the scenes work.
Yeah.
So I have a question. This is kind of going backwards a little bit, but could you spend some time talking about the in-training exams? Because that's really the first experience our students have with ABFAS and boards, taking exams, getting ready to try to be qualified. If you wouldn't mind, just an overview for the students.
Yeah, Kathy, you wanna give a little background, or do you want me to start?
You can do it.
Okay, so the in-training exams, of course, they were started before I was on the board, but I think it came as a result and a request from residency directors wanting to have some type of process to evaluate their residents, and then also have this kind of where are we type of thing. So the in-training exam, they're given every year, first, second, and third year. And in your final year, meaning the third year, there's actually 4 total parts. So for foot, there's didactic and CBPS. And for RRA, which is reconstructive rear foot and ankle surgery, there's didactic and CBPS. So the unique thing about it is they take these exams in the fall. And so you have to realize their final year in training exam is given at the beginning of their third year. And so I think what people don't understand, or at least the residents and their directors may get a little confused or upset when they don't have a pass rate as high as they would like it to be, particularly in rear foot. But what they have to remember is these residents really have just started their third year. Yeah, and so I think maybe, on our part, we might not have done the best in communicating that, we don't expect a lot of people to pass this in the beginning of their third year in RRA. And if you do, that's pretty impressive. I have to say, like, if you pass the RRA in training exam in the beginning of your third year, you're board qualified. This is a very high stakes exam. So I think people need to understand that, maybe your first couple years or so in taking it, you maybe not be so serious, but that final year when you're taking it, it's a very high stakes exam, and they should take it seriously, because any section that they pass on that final year in training exam goes towards their board qualification. And they don't have to take that part again. So if they pass 2 parts, they don't have to take those 2 parts again. And impressively enough, we had 76% of this past year, all of them pass at least 1 part of their final year in training exam that goes towards their board qualification. So that's pretty impressive overall. But I think that's, people have to remember, they're just starting their 3rd year. This is a high stakes exam. If you pass, congratulations, you don't have to do it again. If you fail, it's okay. You can take it again in the spring, like Jeff, you and I did eons ago, where you have that knowledge base and things. The other thing is these exams are supposed to be able, for the residency directors, they get these results back so they can see what areas the residents have done well in. They can see the areas the residents maybe have not done well in. And that way they can kind of, modify their training a little bit or their education with those residents. So it's supposed to be used as a learning tool. And I think some of the residency directors sort of miss out on that opportunity and kind of get down because it was a failure in their eyes when it really was should have been a training. They forget that part of it. It's an in-training exam, and they need to use those results so that they can continue the training and see where they're deficient.
Especially if it's the beginning of their 3rd year, they have
Yes.
almost a whole year to say, okay, this is where we are and this is where we need to build to. Let's design our curriculum to meet that.
Exactly. And, do you want these residents to be passing RRA in the beginning of their 3rd year? Does that mean they don't need their 3rd year if they all pass? So I think we have to sort of understand, when the test is given and the purpose of it.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity for residency directors to assess their curriculum too.
Yeah.
There's downsides to everything, but I know, Kathy, every year when you send me our school results, it's one of the results I look forward to looking at because our students do real well, but it does give you a baseline for assessing your program. So whether it's the school or the residency program, it makes sense. So I think
So people may not know that we do that. So we send the colleges the results of their graduates' 1st year and training exams. They don't get the individual results because that's all confidential, but they get to see the mean for all the different categories and how they compare to the other colleges. But they don't see the other colleges stuff either. They just see the average of the other colleges and then their own results. And that's the reason we send it to you, so that you can see how are your graduates doing compared to the other 1st year residents.
So Joe's teaching our advanced surgery courses now. So there you go, Joe. There's the bar.
Ooh,
Yeah, no pressure.
the bar's high.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, we had talked earlier about your work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. How'd that prepare you for your role at ABFAS, or did it, or was it completely different?
That was completely different, but I think, the majority of my career, I've been in management positions. And that's what a CEO is, right? So my background is management. I had leadership positions in state government and then moved over to the foundation and then became CEO of IASP, if you want to do acronyms, International Association for the Study of Pain. And that was a membership organization. It was large. We had conferences, 8,000 people would attend, and they would be international. So yeah, it's all a management background.
What percentage of your job is leadership versus management? If you want to divide them out.
Sorry.
I would say kind of depends on what's going on.
That makes sense.
I think Michelle's still having.
I know. I noticed that. I kind of was
issues
busy there for a second.
Maybe it's a great time to take a quick break, Jeff, and hear a word from our sponsor.
I think it's a wonderful time. Thank you. Well, we're going to give a shout out to our sponsor, Bako Diagnostics. We all know that early detection is the most important determination in improving patient outcomes. Baco Diagnostics remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing lower extremity pathologies. Baco Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. We always give a shout out to Baco. They've really been good to the schools and helping us with our dermatology classes and doing workshops at the schools. So that was a good time.
And supporting the profession just at all the different CME events. And we're very grateful to Baco.
Yep, very much so. You're back, Michelle.
I am back, and I'm on the computer now, not my phone. So that's how long it took for my computer to reboot, just FYI.
So I have a question for you, Michelle. You're coming out of residency program, you had some phenomenal surgical training, and then you got involved early in your career in service back to the profession. What advice would you give to our students that want to make a difference in our profession going forward, whether it be at ACFAS or ABFAS? Any words of wisdom there?
Yeah, I think you need to follow your passion and see what you're interested in. It's always been very important to me to pay it forward and to give back. My role models and mentors were always very involved academically and giving back and contributing to our profession, and I kind of helped just followed in their footsteps, so to speak. I go back, I'm from PCPM before it actually was taken over by Temple. So yes, Jeff, you and I are a bit older. I drag you with me. But during that time, I still go back to the school every year, or at least I try to, on my own dime, to meet with the students. I stay in touch with the students there and go spend the day in clinic with them and lecture to them. And I just think it's just a great opportunity. I enjoy it probably more than they do. But I think giving back in whatever fashion fits your lifestyle, whether it's being a mentor, whether it is, giving a local lecture in your community, talking to students, helping guide them on their way. But it can be tough because, as you know, when you get out there, it's hard. You got a lot of work, you got to make money, you got bills to pay. And so you get busy and you have to prioritize things. And so I will tell you, though, you can start off in small steps, doing the little things. And then as your time permits and you get more comfortable, look into volunteering more. There are a lot of things you can do. Gosh, you can edit articles. You can, there are a lot of behind the scenes things that you can do in these organizations. But I would say if you want to be involved, then contact someone within that organization that you want to pursue and say, hey, what can I do? Do you need help with something? So I first became involved, I would say, well, not first, but I became very active with ACFAS. When I was pregnant, I was put on 6 months of strict bed rest. And as you can imagine, that was not fun for me because, one, I never sit down, and to be confined to one room for 6 months was, horrendous. And so I just started doing anything and everything that they needed. I was already on one of their committees. I think I had just started kind of getting involved, and I would call almost every day and say, hey, you need anything? I'm just sitting here. I'll edit papers, I'll read, I'll do whatever you want. Just keep my mind busy. So I think, when you want to be involved, I would say figure out the best path for you, how much of an involvement you want to make. When you make the commitment to be involved, then make sure that you fulfill that commitment, because there's nothing more discouraging than having a volunteer and then they don't fulfill that. And we understand things happen and things, but you make the commitment, fulfill the commitment, and work hard at it, because that's when people start noticing. So take pride in what you do, but always, I think, have as your goal why you're doing this. What is your goal in this? Do you want to help move the profession forward? Are you trying to get young people involved? There's always sort of a goal. And for me, during my service, both through ACFAS and here, my main focus was always on the younger members. And so, you know, that's where we started doing the school visits and things. And ABFAS, I think now more than ever, is more involved with young physicians. We do our school visits with ACFAS, but now we also do a second visit to some of the schools. We're trying to do that. And that's more of a personal work-life balance type of meeting, because they really have a lot of questions about things like that. You know, I always found impressive. I'd get up there and give this great talk, or at least what I thought was a great, you know, academic talk with all these cool cases. And I'd say, any questions? And, you know, they're like, no. And then, of course, then there's a whole line of students waiting for you. But they don't want to know about my lecture. They want to know, how do I do it as a working mom? How do I stay involved? How do I do all these things? And so I kind of focused a little bit on the more of the work-life balance things, because that's really what we're looking at. So I think our getting our young members involved is very important. Like I said, so with ABFAS, we've got school visits now. We do APMSA sponsorship, which we increased a pretty significant amount this year. The board unanimously agreed. We have an APMSA liaison we work very closely with. We are doing webinars for the students, a couple of them this year. We've got a Surgeons of Tomorrow contest where we give 2 scholarships a year for these students to come to the annual scientific conference by ACFAS. We've always done the Michael L. Stone Awards, and that's continuing. Each school gets a scholarship per student for that. So, you know, I'm very proud of ABFAS, and we've really kind of, you know, our whole board understands that these young members are kind of our future, and we need to kind of mold them and mend them. And from those students, that's who we look for to be on our committees and things, and, you know, have them be our mentees and kind of grooming them, so to speak. So I guess that was a long way to answer your question. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you.
And even for prospective students, I'd just like to throw that one out there, Jeff, all the work that we have appreciated from ABFAS and supporting Feet on the Street. And I'll throw that ball back to you, Jeff.
Absolutely. I just am so excited about the profession when we all come together and work with a common goal. And we do appreciate ABFAS's support for Feet on the Street. I think I've got 6 visits scheduled this fall.
That's great.
And it's so fun because we go in there and we meet with the students and we bring in a local doc, and ACFAS has been wonderful. Michelle Kennedy's been connecting us with docs all over the country. And it's truly amazing to go in and talk to the students. And some of them have never heard of podiatric medicine before. And then the light bulb goes on, and then hopefully we can get them in shadowing. So we do appreciate that. One thing you had mentioned, Michelle, that I wanted to touch base on, you mentioned that you had mentors that kind of showed you the way. That's just a common theme on Dean's Chat. Every time we bring a leader in the profession onto the podcast, they talk about they were shown the way by various mentors. So I think it's important for our students to find mentors early and often.
Absolutely. And I'll do a plug for ACFAS here in their mentorship program. They've really done a phenomenal job of that. I think their chairman is Laura Sansasti, who I have to take a little credit for. She was my mentee, so I am kind of like a proud mama with that. But their mentors, it's the Chris Mahaffey Leadership program, I should say, but it's basically their mentorship program, and it's phenomenal. I mean, this is my 2nd year being involved with it. I meet with my mentee monthly. We discuss things. There's learning modules that you go over, and it's really exciting. And then at the annual conference, there is a whole kind of meeting reception where we kind of go over everything that was learned, and they give presentations. So it's pretty impressive and pretty significant. And like I said, very important to our profession to have mentors. I feel very honored and lucky to have had the mentors that I have had. So very important.
I can put a little plug for the ACFAS podcast where you and Laura and Jason are talking about that program. That was a really great episode. Maybe we could put a little link, Jeff, in the show notes to it. Because again, you talked about so many things in terms of leadership, and we don't need to talk about them all over again, because again, I'd much rather send people to hear all of the different perspectives there, because it was just, I really appreciated that one. I liked a lot of the spots on that.
Good.
You know, the Michael Stone Award is, I think, such a cool thing, because you wouldn't believe the time that our faculty puts into meeting and discussing all the students and realizing that's like the ultimate award given in our profession. Thank you for doing that, because all of our students that have gotten the Michael Stone Award have just been unbelievable students, going off to top residency programs and being leaders in the profession. So thank you for that too.
And some of them are on our board, and some of them are on our committees.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, Joe, is, you know, we oftentimes tell our students, even at orientation and throughout our meetings, that the holy grail in our profession is to be board certified by the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. So we do set the stage for you guys before you come in and give your talks, and they're all eyes. And you're right, Michelle, they're trying to figure out how to make it work. They know what they want, but they're not sure how they're going to do it. Joe, you deal with that a lot too.
Yeah. And again, their enthusiasm and their excitement. And actually, maybe this is also a great time to talk about the difference between board certification and board qualification. If you guys wanted to comment a little bit about that.
Sure. So board qualification is, like I said, if you take your final year in training exam, and if you pass a section of that, that goes towards your board qualification, so that at the completion of your residency, you pay your fee and you become board qualified, and you don't have to take that portion of the exam again. After you become board qualified, and we've also allowed residents now to use the word board eligible, because we heard that was kind of one of the things that maybe other professions didn't quite understand, or they didn't really know what board qualified was. So we do listen to feedback, so they can use either board qualified or board eligible as they choose. And then once they become board eligible, then they start collecting their cases to submit towards case review. And like I said, there is no more oral exam anymore. So if they want to do, there's two basic parts, foot and then reconstructive rear foot and ankle surgery. So if they choose just to do foot certification, they've got to pass the didactic part and the CBPS part. Once they do that, then they are board qualified. Then they collect the cases, and they have 7 years to accumulate the required cases and the number of cases. They're submitted, and once they pass case review, then they become board certified. If they want to do RRA as well, then of course that's the didactic and the CBPS exam with that as well. Then they become board qualified, and then again they collect those RRA cases and become board certified. And they can very commonly do them together. So the didactics and CBPS, very commonly they do the foot and RRA exams together. They can collect cases simultaneously, but you do need to be foot certified before you can become RRA certified. You can do it at the same time, but you can't be RRA certified without having a foot certification. So in our case review process, I will tell you, it is, we have videos, we have exam prep on how to prepare for case review. We've got all kinds of documents to assist these candidates on how to prepare their cases. I would say the most important thing is they start logging their cases right away. And they are very careful in how they are logging them and making sure they're logged appropriately so that they can be assigned correctly. But I will say I've done case review now for several years. I don't know how many years, but for several years. I can tell you, the process is very fair. I will tell you, candidates oftentimes they don't document properly, different things like that. So it's not always their surgical skill that can affect their final scoring. But it's a whole cumulative thing. So they have to understand They do need to have the proper records and radiographs and documentation and things in order for them to be evaluated correctly. And we do understand that patients are lost to follow-up sometimes. We do understand that complications happen, but those complications need to be recognized. They need to be documented, and we need to see how they handle those complications, because we all have them. Just because you have a complication doesn't mean that you're going to get negative points on anything like that. It's really, you need to recognize and handle it properly, because that's real life, and that's really what case review is about. How are you handling this patient? Is this how we want a certified foot and ankle surgeon to handle this patient properly? And so that's really what it's about. And I think it's a very fair process. And I will tell you, through the years, the candidates have gotten better in case review. At least in my eyes, I see improvement in these things, and maybe because we're educating them more and how to document and to do these things. But I see it improving overall, at least the cases I'm looking at.
And the malpractice insurance companies appreciate us telling people that they have to document better. Because if you document your case well enough for case review, it's going to help you if you ever have a malpractice suit.
Sad. Well said. We're running a little bit short on time, but I didn't want to end the podcast without asking each of you, what do you do when you're not involved in podiatric medicine? Kathy.
I'm a gardener, but flowers more than vegetables, and I love to travel. So
where's your favorite place to travel if you could leave tomorrow?
I don't have one, because I've traveled so much internationally, and to me it's the people you meet. So not the location. So it's all, there's not one place.
Very good. And Michelle, what do you do when you're not engrossed in all things podiatric medicine?
I am not a gardener. Nothing green grows in my house. I will start saying that. I'm a beach girl. I love the beach. So we go to the beaches on weekends that were free. I love anything outdoors, hiking, like I said, the beach. I play the drums occasionally, not as much as I used to, but I still enjoy beating the drums a little bit, getting out a little frustration. I'm a runner. I ran in college, so I still try to run, 4 or 5 times a week. I like to get outside. That's sort of my stress reliever as well. Love all things music and sports. I guess I just love life. I love college football. So we're getting ready to head to Clemson this weekend to see my son and to watch the Clemson hopefully beat NC State. Sorry, North Carolina people. But love all kinds of music. Just anything, just like I said. And I like eating and drinking my wine too. So there's probably not much I don't enjoy. And I like to travel.
Very, very good. So Joe, what we don't talk too much on the podcast about what we like to do. What does our audience not know about you that you like to do?
Oh man, that's a good question. The audience at large, I mean, students know because they like to ask me these questions, but I'd say the audience at large may not know. Music and art are my 2 passions for sure. At this phase of my life, my art consists of crafting with my kids, and it's amazing and wonderful, but nothing like what I used to do. And for music, I used to play the tuba and the sousaphone. So that's kind of a fun fact.
Very good.
Yeah.
Right. Sounds good. All right. Well,
how about you, Jeff? What's something our audience doesn't know about you?
Well, I like you, Michelle, I ran in college and I ran a lot of marathons. Probably the one thing I haven't talked about is I did run a 100-mile trail race in Colorado, and I finished under 24 hours.
Wow.
That was another life ago. I was like 28 years old or something. I'm not
Doesn't
even
McGarry do those too?
What's that?
Jack McGarry, he does those too.
Oh, yes, Jack. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Here's a fun fact. Jack McGarry did my mom's bunion in Denver. Once upon a time. Oh, here's another funny one. My wife and I went to the Cayman Islands, and we're diving and we're having fun. But everywhere I go in the Cayman Islands, I'm seeing podiatrists. I'm like, what on earth is going on here? So we get on the plane to come home, and there's Jack Jack McGarry sitting next to Celia and we chatted all the way home. So I think he had a board, meeting or something in the Caymans back in the day. And I love those kind of stories. They're just kind of fun.
Small world, small
profession, but it's everywhere,
Yeah.
All right, everyone. So Kathy, you'd asked me how long these chats are, and they're, I like to say 35 minutes, but we start talking. Next thing you know, an hour goes by. So anyways, I want to thank both of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. We're going to send you a Dean's Chat cup. Joe's got one.
Well,
If you're traveling and contemplating where you're going next, you got to have a cup of coffee or something in a ask with you. So,
Making all the
thank you.
resident newsletters
That's
for them to
right.
find
right.
all those resources online.
Oh, very
Caffeine
good.
is my lifeline, so that'll come in very handy.
Me too. Well, you're welcome. Well, we appreciate all you do for the profession. We appreciate you keeping the bar high for board certification. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us. What a great discussion with the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgeons and their leadership, CEO Kathy Kreiter and President Dr. Michelle Butterworth. Thank you again. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. And until next week, cheers, everyone.